The calabash shattered against the mud wall, sending shards of clay and hot pepper soup splashing across Ngozi's face. She didn't scream. She had learned months ago that screaming only made it worse. Tunde stood over her, chest heaving, his massive frame blocking the doorway like a storm cloud. You call this food? You call yourself a wife? This is the story of a man who believed power was found in his fists, and a woman who would rise from the grave to teach him otherwise. Stay with me, because what happens next will leave you speechless. In the riverside village of Oboro, where the morning mist rolled off the water like whispers of forgotten prayers, Tunde was known as the man no woman could challenge. He walked through the market square with his chest pushed forward, his voice booming across the stalls. My house, my rules, he would declare to anyone who would listen. The men nodded in approval. The women looked away. When Tunde announced he was marrying Ngozi, a schoolteacher from the neighboring town of Akola, the village buzzed with excitement. She was beautiful, they said. Educated. Soft-spoken. The perfect wife for a strong man. The wedding day arrived with drums that shook the earth and voices that carried joy into the sky. Ngozi wore white lace that caught the sunlight, and when she smiled, it was like watching sunrise break through darkness. Tunde strutted beside her, his hand gripping hers possessively, already treating her like property he had purchased. Look at my wife, he announced to the guests, his voice cutting through the celebration. See how quiet she is. That's how a woman should be. Silent when her husband speaks. Ngozi's smile faltered for just a moment, but no one noticed except the old woman selling palm wine in the corner. She had seen this story before. She knew how it would end. The first 3 weeks were a performance. Tunde played the loving husband when neighbors visited. He praised Ngozi's cooking, bragged about her intelligence, held her hand during evening walks. But when the doors closed and the audience disappeared, a different man emerged. It started small. A complaint about too much salt in the soup. A harsh word about how she folded his clothes. Then came the night that changed everything. Ngozi had spent hours preparing egusi soup, grinding the melon seeds by hand, adding stockfish and bitter leaf exactly how Tunde's mother had taught her. She served it with pounded yam, still steaming, formed into perfect mounds. She smiled as she placed it before him, hoping tonight would be different. Tunde took one bite. His face twisted. What is this nonsense? I made it exactly how your mother. The bowl flew across the room. Soup splattered the walls. Yam rolled across the floor. My mother. You're comparing yourself to my mother. You stupid girl. The first slap knocked Ngozi off her feet. She tasted blood. The second came before she could speak. The third before she could breathe. Outside, neighbors heard the sounds. Plates breaking. A woman whimpering. A man's voice thundering with rage. They shook their heads and returned to their evening meals. Husband and wife matter, they told their children. Not our business. Ngozi lay on the floor long after Tunde stormed out to drink palm wine with his friends. Her cheek was swollen. Her lip split. But worse than the physical pain was the realization settling into her bones like poison. This was her life now. This was the man she had vowed to honor. This was the marriage everyone had celebrated. The beatings became as regular as the seasons. Tunde would find reasons: burnt rice, a wrinkled shirt, a greeting he considered too cheerful to male neighbors, silence he interpreted as disrespect. Some days he needed no reason at all. He would return home drunk and angry at the world, and Ngozi became the target for every frustration he carried. She grew thin. Her laughter disappeared. The brightness in her eyes faded to something hollow and distant. The other women in the market noticed but said nothing. One older woman, Mama Udo, pulled her aside one morning. Sister, why are you staying? Ngozi's voice was barely a whisper. Where would I go? My family would be shamed. They would say I failed as a wife. They would send me back to him. Mama Udo squeezed her hand but had no answer. They both knew the truth. In Oboro, a woman's suffering was considered the price of marriage. One evening, Tunde invited friends to their home. Ngozi prepared jollof rice with chicken, plantains fried to golden perfection, and fresh fish pepper soup. She served them with her head bowed, moving quietly between the men like a ghost. "Your wife is well trained," one friend commented, laughing. Tunde beamed with pride. "The secret is simple. Break them early. Let them know who is master." "My first wife," he caught himself, but too late. The room went silent. Ngozi's hands trembled as she poured palm wine. "First wife?" the friend asked. "I thought Ngozi was." "A slip of the tongue," Tunde said quickly, his jaw tightening. "Drink up." But after the guest left, Tunde found Ngozi standing in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. "You had another wife. What happened to her?" His hand wrapped around her throat so fast she didn't see it coming. "You question me. You dare question me in my own house." He beat her worse that night than ever before. When he finally stopped, exhausted from his own violence, Ngozi couldn't stand. She crawled to their bedroom and pulled herself onto the mat. 3 days later, during a rainstorm that seemed to weep for her, Ngozi's heart simply stopped. The herbalist who examined her body said what everyone feared to speak aloud: her heart broke before her body did. Grief and fear, they kill as surely as poison. The funeral was elaborate. Tunde wailed louder than anyone, threw himself on the ground, beat his chest in theatrical grief. "My wife. My precious wife. Why have you left me?" The villagers watched his performance and shook their heads in sympathy. "He truly loved her," they whispered. Only Mama Udo stood apart, her eyes dry, her face hard. She knew better. 3 months after Ngozi's death, Tunde traveled to Ikoga, a town far enough away that his reputation hadn't reached. He wore his finest clothes and his most charming smile. He was hunting. In a small compound near the market, he found what he was looking for. Amina, 22 years old, daughter of a struggling tailor. She was polite, kept her eyes lowered, spoke only when spoken to. "Perfect. Your daughter is well-mannered," Tunde told her father. "In my village, we value such qualities." The father, desperate to secure his daughter's future, practically pushed her toward Tunde. "She doesn't talk back. She cooks well. She will serve you faithfully." Tunde smiled. "Exactly what I need." What neither man knew was that Amina had already made a journey of her own. 2 weeks earlier, disguised in simple clothes, she had traveled to Oboro. She had spoken to Mama Udo. She had heard about Ngozi. She had learned everything. And she had made a plan. The wedding was small, quick, efficient. Tunde brought Amina to his compound in Oboro, and from the first moment, she played her role perfectly. Obedient. Quiet. Trembling when he raised his voice. Apologizing for the smallest mistakes. Tunde bragged to his friends in the village square. "See. I told you the secret is to break them early. My new wife knows her place. She trembles before I even raise my hand." The men laughed and congratulated him. The women said nothing, but their eyes held something different now. Something waiting. 6 months passed. Amina cooked Tunde's meals, washed his clothes, kept the compound spotless. She moved through the house like a shadow, always anticipating his needs, always staying just out of reach of his anger. Tunde grew comfortable. Confident. Lazy. Then came Monday morning. Tunde woke up to silence. No clattering pots. No smell of yam porridge. No wife moving quietly through the house preparing his breakfast. He sat up, confused. "Amina." His voice echoed through the compound. Where is my food? No answer. He stormed into the bedroom. Amina sat calmly on a stool, painting her nails a deep red. She didn't look up. Amina. Are you mad? Where is my breakfast? She blew on her nails gently. Oh, that. I didn't feel like cooking today. The kitchen is there. You have 2 hands. Make it yourself. The words seemed to tilt. Tunde couldn't process what he was hearing. His wife, his quiet, obedient wife, had just told him to cook his own food. What did you just say to me? Amina looked up then, and Tunde saw something in her eyes he had never seen before. Not fear. Not submission. Something cold and sharp as a blade. I said make your own food. I'm tired. Rage exploded in his chest. He lunged at her, his hand raised to strike, the same hand that had struck Ngozi 100 times. But before his palm could connect, Amina moved. She caught his wrist, twisted it with shocking strength, and in one fluid motion, flipped Tunde onto his back. The air rushed from his lungs as he hit the floor. Before he could react, she was on top of him, her knee pressing into his chest, her hand wrapped around his throat, not squeezing hard enough to choke, but firm enough to make her point. Tunde's eyes went wide with shock. What are you? Listen very carefully, Amina whispered, her face inches from his. I know what you did to Ngozi. I spoke to Mama Udo. I spoke to the midwife who tried to save her. I spoke to your neighbor who heard her screaming every night. You didn't just beat her, Tunde. You killed her. Slowly. Day by day. You broke her spirit until her heart couldn't take anymore. Terror flooded through Tunde's body. I didn't, she just died, her heart. Yes. Her heart. Because of you. Amina's voice was calm, steady. Terrifying in its control. And I came here to teach you something. I came here to make you understand what it feels like to live in fear. She released him and stood up. Tunde scrambled backward, suddenly seeing his wife as if for the first time. Here are your new rules, Amina said, crossing her arms. You will cook your own meals. You will wash your own clothes. You will clean this compound. Every day. Without complaint. And if you refuse, she smiled, and it was not a kind smile. If you refuse, I will go to the village elders. I will tell them everything about Ngozi. I will tell them how you beat her until her heart gave out. They might forgive a man who beats his wife. But a man who kills one wife and marries another. They'll chase you out of Oboro with stones. You're blaming me for. Test me, Amina interrupted. Refuse to cook today, and by tonight, the whole village will know the truth. Try to hit me, and I promise you, you'll regret it. Tunde opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time in his adult life, he was afraid. That morning, Tunde, the man who had boasted that no woman could challenge him, stood in his kitchen learning how to peel yams. He burned the first batch. Amina made him start over. By noon, the gossip had spread through Oboro like wildfire. Women abandoned their market stalls to peek through Tunde's compound walls. They watched the mighty Tunde carrying water from the well. They saw him hanging wet clothes on the line, the same clothes he used to throw at Ngozi demanding they be washed again. Is that Tunde doing housework? One woman whispered. His new wife has turned him into a houseboy, another laughed. By evening, children had composed a song. Tunde, wife's new maid. Tunde, so afraid. Once a lion, now a mouse. Cleaning, cooking in his house. They sang it as they played in the streets. They sang it loud enough for Tunde to hear. 2 weeks later, Tunde tried to rebel. Enough, he shouted. Throwing down the broom. I'm a man. I won't be humiliated like this anymore. Amina looked up from the fabric she was sewing. Oh. So you're ready for me to visit the elders? You wouldn't dare. She stood up slowly, walked to the door, and called out, Mama Udo. Could you come here please? Tunde's blood turned to ice. Within seconds, the old woman appeared at the compound gate, her eyes shrewd and knowing. Yes, my daughter. Amina smiled sweetly at Tunde. Never mind, Mama. My husband was just saying how much he enjoys his new responsibilities. Weren't you, husband? Tunde's jaw worked silently. He could see Mama Udo watching him, waiting. He knew if he spoke the truth now, if he tried to claim his authority, this woman would tell everything. The shame, the scandal, possibly even criminal charges, it would destroy him. Yes, he said quietly, picking up the broom. I was just saying that. Mama Udo's smile was slow and satisfied. Good. Very good. She left, but Tunde knew the message was clear. The women of Oboro were watching. They were protecting Amina. And they were enjoying his downfall. 3 months passed. Tunde's muscles softened. His voice grew quieter. The swagger disappeared from his walk. He cooked breakfast every morning, learning to make it properly after many burnt attempts. He washed clothes at the river, enduring the giggles of women who had once feared him. He swept the compound, fetched water, ground pepper. Meanwhile, Amina's fabric business flourished. She traveled to neighboring towns, bought beautiful materials, sold them at the market for good profit. She hired 2 young women to help her. She saved money. She built a life. She never beat Tunde. She didn't have to. The work, the humiliation, the complete reversal of power, it broke his pride more effectively than any violence could have. One evening, Tunde sat on the ground pounding yam while Amina sat in the chair that used to be his throne, reviewing her business accounts. He looked at her. This woman who had systematically dismantled everything he thought he was. Why? He asked quietly. Why did you marry me if you knew? Amina set down her papers and looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. Because Ngozi deserved justice. Because you needed to learn. Because the next woman, the one you would have married after me, deserved to be saved from you. I've learned, Tunde said, and there were tears in his eyes. I've learned, Amina. Have you? She stood up, walked to the small shrine in the corner where a photo of Ngozi hung surrounded by flowers. Tell her. Tell her what you've learned. Tunde crawled to the shrine on his knees. In front of Ngozi's gentle face, captured forever in that photograph, he wept. I was a monster. I killed you with my pride and my anger. I treated you like property instead of a person. I destroyed the gift God gave me because I was too foolish to see it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Amina watched him cry and felt no satisfaction, only sadness for all the years wasted, for the woman who died too young, for the man who had to be broken to understand basic humanity. Every week, Amina visited Ngozi's grave. She brought fresh flowers, poured libations, spoke to the spirit of the woman she had never met but had avenged. Rest now, sister, she whispered, kneeling in the red dirt. He learned his lesson. He'll never hurt another woman. I made sure of it. The village of Oboro changed after that. Fathers began teaching their sons differently. When a boy raised his hand to his sister, the father would say, remember Tunde. You want to end up like him. Women spoke more freely about the abuse they suffered. Some left their violent husbands, finding courage in Amina's example. The old ways, the silence, the acceptance of suffering, began to crack. Tunde became a proverb: if you mistreat your wife, you end up like Tunde of Oboro, servant to his own wife, singing lullabies to his own pride's funeral. Years later, travelers passing through would sometimes ask about the man cooking in the market, selling food while his wife managed her successful fabric empire. The villagers would smile and tell the story: The story of the man who feared nothing until he learned to fear the consequences of his own cruelty. And every time they told it, they would end the same way. So, my friend, if you ever think pride makes you strong, remember Tunde, the man who thought he was a lion but became a house cat with a broom chasing him. Amina never remarried. She didn't need to. She built schools for girls, funded by her business. She taught women to read and write. She created safe houses for wives fleeing violence. And through it all, Tunde cooked her meals, washed her clothes, and lived with the consequences of what he had done. Some people called it revenge. Amina called it justice. The women of Oboro called it a miracle. And Ngozi finally rested in peace, knowing that her death had not been in vain, that her suffering had taught a lesson, that one man's transformation might save 100 other women from her fate. The story doesn't end with happiness. It ends with something more valuable: change. Real, lasting, uncomfortable change that makes people think twice before raising their hands, before breaking spirits, before treating love as ownership. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that justice sometimes comes in unexpected forms, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment telling me what you think about Amina's decision. Was it revenge or justice? And like this video so more people can hear this story, because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear it. Remember, strength is not found in dominating others. True strength is found in respecting them, in building them up, in recognizing that the person you vow to love deserves protection, not destruction. And if you ever find yourself becoming like Tunde, stop. Change. Before someone has to teach you the lesson Amina taught him. Because in the end, the man who feared nothing learned to fear his wife, and in that fear, he found his humanity.